Kathryn Frietze. Hi, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Kathryn Frietze, and I am an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico in the School of Medicine, and I have a PhD in biomedical sciences.
So, how did you get to where you are now?
So I grew up in Washington State, where I went to school in sort of the eastern part of Washington State. That's more rural, and from there I went to college at Central Washington University at a relatively small state school, and I got really interested in biology in my first year of college, and so I decided to be a biology major. And I had a professor who I was taking a class from, and she suggested that I come and do research in her lab. So I actually did research on long-lived conifers, so pine trees, basically. And part of that was investigating how the different trees were related to each other, and how within one single tree the genetic material, the DNA, changed. And so part of that was I got to go out on these sort of field trips where we collected tree samples, and we would bring them back to the lab, and we'd pour liquid nitrogen onto the pine needles and grind them up and extract DNA from them. And it was a lot of fun to be able to go out into the field and collect these samples and then bring them back into the lab and extract DNA, and then run a bunch of tests on them to look at that DNA and try to understand what that DNA could tell us about the trees. And my favorite part of that was just being in the lab and using the really cool equipment, and I think grinding up the pine needles was a lot of fun because it smelled really good. It smelled like a forest in the lab. And so that was my first introduction to research, and I just really, really loved it. From there, I did another research experience in a toxicology lab where we were looking at chemicals and how the body breaks them down. And then I knew that I wanted to continue doing research. And so I applied to graduate school here at University of New Mexico. And so I moved from Washington State to New Mexico, and I've been here since 2004. And I did my PhD research investigating viruses, respiratory viruses that infect the lungs in humans and cause severe infections. They're a particular type of virus called adenovirus, and they're really common in children. And so I was really interested in infectious disease, and after I got done getting my PhD, I needed to go on and do more research to become an independent scientist. And so I started doing research as a postdoctoral fellow, which is sort of a training period to continue doing research after you get your PhD. And so I stayed in New Mexico. I really like New Mexico. My husband is from New Mexico, and so we decided to stay here. And so I continued doing research at UNM. I started investigating vaccines and using a really cool technology that was developed by my postdoctoral mentor to develop vaccines. And so I've continued doing similar work. I'm currently an assistant professor in my department, and that just means I am sort of a newer faculty member in our department, trying to get my own research projects up and running. And so, so yeah, that's kind of been my path to get to where I am.
What do you find to be the most interesting or exciting thing in what you do now?
I really like research that involves collaborating with other people. So working on teams that have different expertise. And so some of the work that we do, we collaborate with people who work at other universities or even in other countries. We have done collaborations with a group that works on a virus called dengue virus. and they are in Peru. So I actually got to travel to Peru and meet the scientists there and see sort of their research labs there. So that was really exciting. So I really like collaborating with other scientists that bring different ideas together to try to solve a big problem.
Any advice that you would like to give our community who's watching?
I'd say my advice to community members who are watching this would be that you don't have to know when you're a kid that you want to be a scientist. You can be interested in all sorts of things. I thought when I was in elementary school that I wanted to be a fashion designer. And when I first started college, I thought I wanted to be a child psychologist. But keeping your mind open and learning as much as you can about different fields will give you opportunities to see what you really like and what you're good at. And there's always new opportunities to learn something.